With the release of set 5 for Lyrical in Japan, today I'm going to be going over my personal tier list of all the Lyrical decks from that set plus more. Without further ado, let's get started. So here we are on Curly Haired Hero's tier list that he made for almost all the Riot lines for standard format. So thank you to Curly for making this list. I try to compile all the Lyrical decks, even the collab decks, in this list, so I could just go one by one and just put them on this list. So just before I start, I want to let you guys know that this is my personal tier list. So if you do disagree, it's okay to disagree, but this is just how I feel of what I play tested with and how results have been showing up in Japan, and not totally my bias, but it is just my opinion. We do not have the set out in English, so we don't know like specifically how English players or the West is going to be playing these decks. So again, this is my personal opinion. So even if there's a deck that you like and it's really low or too high, I mean, you can make your own list. So without further ado, we're just gonna get started with this now, since I had a weight room. So we have Marilyn. So Marilyn overall, I think that like her support cards that Bushrider has been like revealing for all the other quick start decks have been very decent. But Marilyn overall, I think she just kind of suffers from like not having a main game plan. Like you kind of just do her 4 attacks and that's it. There's no like diverse play style that you can have with the deck. You can run many generic cards. You could put Lyrical Pile into this deck. But overall, I don't think her strength is that like recognized yet until we get more cards. And there are still more cards to be revealed in set 4. Yeah, for set 4 for Divines. So overall, I don't think her strength is necessarily that high. But I think that she's very open for you to play any generics that you want. And like her strength comes from like how like interchangeable her line could be, and interchangeable that her support cards could be. And you don't even have to necessarily play like her dedicated support cards if you don't want to. So as well as she also is getting a promo that energy charges, so that helps as well. So overall, this is not going to be ordered by strength anyway. I'm just going to put her in C tier right now. She could be a low B, but I don't think she has a solid foundation of a deck yet to be able to justify her being like in B tier. Next, Chris Rain. Oh boy. So after, you know, like she was revealed, and during like that whole stream or month, I was just talking about Chris Rain. When she first was set in DZ set 1, I believe she had potential, but she wasn't there yet. Once we got Franchette, the strength of the deck increased, but not necessarily like the finishing power of the deck. And now with Festival for English and set 2 that came out already, sorry, I already said that, she has more of a diverse play style. But overall, I think Chris Rain's like main weakness is that she doesn't have a late game. So like you can use your divine skill like early or to the mid game point, well, like when you and your opponent are both grade 3 or they just persona ride. She just doesn't have enough like finishing power after her divine skill turn, and that really hinders the deck. She has a bunch of different builds that you can make, but Chris Rain is very aggro. Probably one of the more aggro decks of Lyrical, just because you can switch her line. You can like have interchangeable pieces, and her good cards are mostly generic for the most part. However, like I said, her biggest weakness, I believe right now, is that her late game potential is not as strong as other Lyrical decks. Like for example, an easy one is like Letitia. Her late game is very strong, while Chris Rain's is not as strong. So before I would have said she's an A, just because of like how like versatile and different that you can add different generics to the deck. But I'm going to put her in B just for right now. I think once we have more cards that help the late game for Chris Rain, I think she'll shoot up to A or even S as of right now. Next, we have Flam Glam. I will include, well, I will include without her support in set 4 for Divine. So she did receive a double R and a rare that helps the deck. to, you know, consistently get Flame Glam. So this will be without that for right now because it's not even out in JP. So Flame Glam, I know I've been on like a whole Flame Glam month thing trying to like understand the ins and out of this deck and like to see if it's truly strong or not. Honestly, I think Flame Glam is a B tier deck. Even with all the stuff that we have now, the Rye line is pretty consistent. The deck is very cheap to build. Deck can have a very strong late game. It has a very good early game too, that it's you don't have to commit as many cards to like rush your opponent because they go back to the soul. It has a lot of consistent retire since, you know, I just recently discovered that, you know, you can Soul Blast out Rugia for Verte, and if you use Rugia's skill to re-ride your starter, you're able to put Rugia from your drop zone to the Vanguard circle at the end of your turn as from drop or soul. So soul issues only come into play when you don't have enough soul for Verte to do that. But since, you know, I decided to actually read the card, the deck doesn't really have that much soul issues. So Flame Glam has a lot of strong power, has decent defense. The deck has like a lot of inbuilt shield too, just from Person, and it's still open to generic cards. In the future, I think like with more supports and a better like Flame Glam targets, it can show up to A. But for right now, I think it's a solid B tier. And again, these aren't ordered. Next, we have the collab deck. This deck, I'm not really too sure. Like specifically for a lyrical only thing. I have not tested this out yet, but from the support that we got from Lyrical set 5, there's a triple rare that can like look at the top 5 cards of the deck to search up to like a normal order. I think it could be Blitz Order, but forgive me if I'm incorrect about that. I think the deck is pretty okay. Like I haven't tested it myself, but the concept of it, it's basically like it's Maryland. However, you have a Akane and I forgot her grade 1. You're able to just call those two out. You have inbuilt counter charge, so any cards that cost like a lot of counter blast, you have an inbuilt counter charge. She allows you to play 2 orders a turn. You're able to also multi-attack on your first grade 3 turn. I believe it could be restricted, but you're able to multi-attack. The only thing that I feel like this deck lacks is just numbers. But I think further on in the future, Lyrical is able to get like more rear guards that get like generic power or hit like easier thresholds, especially since we have upcoming cards in the Destined one that hasn't been revealed yet. So maybe it might have some order-based support or synergy with that. However, I think it's a solid B tier just because like even on a budget, you can still make a pretty competent deck. And with more powerful cards like Strega, Yuika, you're able to just use the versatility of, you know, their skills to be able to like have a good early game and a plus. Next, we have Medio. So I fought Medio and I've seen some games with Medio. Medio's strength is that she's able to have like a very pressuring turn 3. Some of these decks from set 5 that have dress-ups has a very strong turn 3, but a very weak going second turn. Going second play, and the deck is like very weak against going second. Medio, I believe she's in B tier. Just that because if you go first, you have a very strong grade 3 turn push with multi-attackers or resenders that get crit. That isn't like grade restricted at all. Her main issue is resources. You're using a lot of counter blasts and a lot of soul blasts to get these effects off. And there's not a lot of cards that refund those resources. And some of her cards from previous sets are now locked out just because of how the new Medio works. However, because of the dress up allowing your front row to get 5k if you have a Medio on drop zone, it makes it so that you hit higher numbers. So numbers isn't an issue now. It's just more resource intensive. Again, like after playing against the deck can like get choked on counter blast just because you're using a lot of counter blast for cards and you're using a lot of soul blast. Next, we have Lofa. So a much needed dress up, I'll do say so myself. Lofa has gotten a lot of buffs from this dress up and also just support cards from set 5. Lofa now, like, she can have a very strong early game now. One of the rares is able to look at the top 5 or 4, whatever, to call a grade 3. And you have an early game rush when your opponent's on grade 2 or a grade 1. I think that's very strong. Again, her issue, I think, is just going second, or you not necessarily have enough shield, since now the new Lofa give your old copies and herself 20k shield. So now you have more shield in your deck. I believe the issue is just sometimes drawing your important combo pieces, which in this deck is definitely Fouetti, to be able to get 5 attacks. Without Fouetti, I don't think you're really pushing that hard. And the deck hits very strong numbers. The deck can plus decently, but not a lot compared to other decks in this list. I think it's a solid deck overall. I don't think it's like super competitive like an A. It has been showing results in Japan. I have not played it myself, but I do recognize the strength, and I have seen the deck work in action. I'm going to put her in B for right now. She's not quite up there in A, or have like that strong synergy with compared to some of the other decks that are going to be in A. Next, we have Hazoret. Hazoret has, like I said before, some of the grade 3s in decks from set 5 have a very strong grade 3 turn. Hazoret is no slouch to that. She has a very strong grade 3 turn that's able to hit over opponent's defensive while they're on grade 2. She's also able to consistently, draw cards back, clear her board against decks that like to pinpoint, retire, or mass retire. She also can compress the deck very well, since, you're constantly drawing cards back. The card that's able to send crits back to your deck, one of her new support cards, you're able to compress the deck with triggers in the late game if you keep drawing into the same cards over and over. Hazoret also just allows your rears to hit better numbers compared to like her older form. Granted, her older form, she had a higher number, but she trades that to be able to get an extra attack in the back row and for your rear guards to hit even larger. So overall, I think that's a very good plus for Hazoret. Like I said, I think the only issue, well, there's 2 issues. I think for Hazoret, it's, again, going second, because a lot of her pressure is strong going first. And I think just not enough people are playing the deck. It's not a very popular deck compared to decks like Michu, Kyoka, Lutetia, and other decks. I don't think a lot of people are playing it just because of just due to popularity. So I, again, think Hazoret is going to be a B tier deck just for that reason. Next, we have this promo card. So basically, she allows your vanillas to get extra shield and power. But for that cost, you can't play cards that don't have act, continuous, or auto on your rear guard circle. Or Guardian Circle, I believe, too. So you can't even play perfect guards. But you're able to use 2 orders in a turn, I believe. I believe, or you can like resend or something. This deck is basically like, it's like the ultimate gamble deck, like Risk It All, I don't think it's very competitive at all, nor have I seen a top, maybe like a local top. This is going to D tier until it specifically gets more support. But I don't really think, it's a funny meme deck, but I don't think it's like very strong. Next, we have Michu. So Michu overall, I have not played Michu. I played against Michu. I've seen what Michu can do. I've seen the tops from Michu. I'm not a Michu expert or a main. I've heard of a lot of Michu enthusiasts voicing concerns for the deck, like after like your dress up persona turn, there's no like turn after that. So there's not like a real like turn after that, so you blow up all of your not resources like cannonballs and stuff like that. That's just what I've heard. But I cannot doubt Michu's strength. It's very strong. But also it could be because it's very popular as well, which is understandable. Me, myself, I will place it in A, just because the deck has a lot of drawing, has a lot of deck compression, has a very strong burst turn. And also, compared to the other glitter decks, we have our Ride Up card in the set that's very cheap. So if you had Michu, you're able to just essentially just upgrade a deck from this. And it's a very strong deck. You don't need any other generic cards like Strega, Yuika. You can play them, but it's not necessarily needed for this deck. So I think it's a very strong contender by itself. It's very easy to play too, And like I said, it's very strong. So I'm not gonna like doubt her strength. She deserves to be an A tier. Next, Kyoka, a deck that I am very excited for. I can't wait for it to come out in English. Kyoka, I know I've talked about it a little bit on some of my other videos or streams, but this new Kyoka is like very, I believe it's probably one of the more in-depth lyrical decks, just because you have so many different forms of play and potential that you could put into the deck. The new Kyoka herself, she's able to get a magazine order or a unit if you declare the same grade. She's able to give, you know, your front row 5k power, as well as your Kyokas in the back row center column can attack. So now you can get an inherent 4 attacks. By herself, by the way, you don't even need Archie. Archie could also get multiple attacks, so you can have a potential of 6 attacks in the turn if you have all the resources. Thanks to her magazine orders and her ult support, you're able to just, you know, call cards from your drop zone to recur a board. Your board also disappears by itself. You're able to get magazines from your deck or call a specific grade 1 from your deck, or yeah, from your deck to Rear Guard Circle to have a more established board. Your early game is very solid. Her new triple R is able to just search for other cards that you need on your board. So if you're Mitchie or Archie, you use that card skill, find Archie, and you can call it. Kyoka has a lot of moving parts, and I think it's very consistent in doing that. I think what I've heard is that sometimes you will whiff on your top 5 checks. I think that if you're banking on the top 5 check to call a specific unit, like if you need that specific unit because you have it drawn into, I can understand whiffing it. Like if you need an Archie or need Franchette to be able to, you know, establish a board or get specific pieces back to hand, or you want to draw more cards or a PG, I completely understand that. But I don't think that's like the main issue or weakness of the deck. I think probably one of the main weaknesses of the deck is that, for me, I think it's just the pilots. Like we've seen a lot of Kyoka lists like top or they're close to topping, but I think it's just like they slightly misplay or don't think ahead in the future to be able to prepare for the next turns. Like I've often seen Kyokas trying to do the whole 6 attack play when your opponents are grade 2 or 1 damage. Like you only got 2 damage. You don't have enough resources, soul, and building up cards in your hand to do that. And then the opponent's turn and they clap back and they can't maintain their stability after that. But for me personally, I'm not going to put Kyoka in S, but she's very close to S. But I'm going to put her in A for right now, because I don't think there is like a definitive The Lyrical deck yet. But overall, I think Kyoka is at the top of A, or near top of A in my opinion. Next, I have Letitia. Again, I haven't played Letitia. I've seen a lot of gameplay of Letitia. I know her strengths. Letitia's like overall gameplay has not changed, except that her new form hits harder and it's very strong. It's like the turning point of the game. Like, can you survive this turn when, you know, your Nostria's hitting over 45k and, you know, Letitia's restanding and not losing a drive check? Yeah, like it's a very strong card. In the deck itself, I think other than like maybe the early game, in my opinion, is just kind of like not that great sometimes. Overall, I think like her late game is astronomically high compared to like some of the other decks that we have. It's very strong. It's probably the highest late game based deck that Lyrical has right now, just because of how hard it can hit, and you're able to essentially like get your cursed plays into soul, and you use that to plus into not neg. I think like she doesn't have that many like diverse plays compared to other decks, so that makes her easier to play in the tournament setting. So I'm gonna put Letitia in A. Like her late game is not to be underestimated. She hits very hard numbers. She restands twice without discarding a card. She's able to search for a curse play from deck or drop. I'm not sure soul. Just deck or drop. Her curse plays are still strong, as well as with her promo. She has an engine that's rolling and it's very simple to do. But in my opinion, I think it's just a lack of like diversity from the deck building to be able to like combat different metas in the future might hinder her. But then again, her late game is so strong it probably doesn't even matter. So that's just a me issue. Next, we have Coral. Coral, I played against it many times, and I've seen games with Coral. I think she's strong. She's very strong. I wouldn't say she's A tier strong. I will say she's in B tier for now until we get more cards. Coral, she does have an okay early game, not the greatest. It depends if you're playing cards like Eureka or some other type of cards to help with the early game. Coral's late game is very good. Don't get me wrong. It's not like Lutetia good or Michu good. Kyoka has a ceiling when it comes to her late game, when it comes to power, but her early game is by far better than these two, and by far better than the other decks in his list. That makes her to A, and she's able to have so many versatility, different options in her play. Coral is still very simple to play. She does have the power, but I think it's just it's not as great as these contenders in A. When it comes to like I said, other than Kyoka, I don't think she's outbeating Michu and Lutetia when it comes to like that sort of strength. But also another issue that I could see from Coral is that she is a 4-attack deck, but also is that when it comes to something like Flame Glam, Coral, you want all of your Ride deck cards in your soul. Flame Glam could call them and reuse them and keep doing that. Coral can do that too, but I don't think she does it as effectively as Flame Glam at the moment. She does get very strong numbers on her turn 3, so if she goes first, she's probably pushing more harder than these decks, bearing like Flame Glam, because the deck doesn't care if you're a grade 2 or grade 3, is going to do the re-ride. And Coral doesn't care if your opponent's grade 3 or grade 2 to do the restand and the power. But I think she's a little bit slower than the decks in A when it comes to like early game and pressuring them. But also a big factor is that you have all this power, but none of your rear guards, except Coral, which could get a crit and drive, have any like real pressure other than just power. Michu can get a drive check. Kyoka, again, she has the versatility, deck compression, and all of that. That makes her really strong. And Lutetia, she makes power so big on her first grade 3 turn and her grade 4 turn. Plus, she just restands without discarding anything. She's going to push through and make your opponent commit cards in their hand. So I don't think Coral doesn't have much of that, but she's still a good deck in the B tier slot. Next, we have Vert. Honestly, like, Vert has the problem of, well, we'll talk about her strength. The deck is consistent with what it wants to do. You want to ride another Vert from your hand to be able to get a Persona Ride or a pseudo Persona Ride if you're going first. It has some bounty in her kit. Sorry, she can multi-attack as well, and she gets another drive. I think I could be completely forgetting about it, but she has a lot of plussing in her kit. The only issue, like, she has many issues, like the fact that she's 4 attack, albeit Coral's 4 attack with huge power. Vert can do that, but it's not as like potent because Vert herself does not get a crit, while Coral gets a crit. That makes a world of a difference between, oh, I'm just gonna risk the no guard on Vert. You drew so many cards, you check no crits, for example. While Coral doesn't draw as much as Vert, but she has the crit on top of it, so she could possibly check her crits more, as well as her support cards being able to like draw cards for her as well, or giving pressure like that. Vert doesn't have any of those cards. Granted, you can play some of the Prism cards with her, like the grade 2 from Labrador set, to be able to search for more prisms, but Vert herself lacks any like real pressure when it comes to the Vanguard specifically, and her rears are sort of blockable. I've been playing against this deck with her mini. I was able to just block like the Vert columns, not the Vert columns, the Rosa columns and the clear columns that have them in there. It's not as threatening as something like Coral, which they have a lot of power and the Vanguard's pressure as well. I'm not going to put her in C because she's not C tier. She does need help, but I'll leave her in B tier for that reason. Next, we have Absolute Zero. So, honestly, she has a lot of potential in the future just because of her continuous skill to essentially like pressure your opponent's hand if they want to attack more than 4 times. However, like she gets a drive, right? She gets a drive and she's able to multi-attack thanks to her triple R. But the issues of the deck is far more greater than like Vert or Coral. Her rears don't hit enough numbers to justify like playing this over it. Her line, albeit I personally think is not that good, but I understand the purpose of it because you need power to your front row to pressure your opponent's hand. And the deck like just lacks a lot of like good Judge Maidens. Like we have Judge Maidens that kind of negate the cost of you discarding for her effect or for effects in the deck, but they're not substantial or powerful enough to like warrant playing those in the deck. As well as just your rear guards do not hit any numbers or have any like self-sustaining pressure. If your rears had a crit, it will make it more likely that your opponent will commit cards and on their following turn. If they have like 5 cards at the start of the turn and they try to multi-attack, them discarding a card puts a lot more pressure on them. However, I won't doubt the deck's power because it has been seen play locally. It has won some local events. It even got a mention like top 16 at a WGP team event recently. But I don't think the deck is that good now. Also, I think it's just lack of experimentation so far when it comes to like dividing her true strength of the deck. So for right now, I'm going to put her in B tier. I'm in C tier, sorry. Next, we have Petrolka. So Petrolka, honestly, like her whole shtick is to have Highlander cards, to have specifically one of every different card in your deck, except for support cards. So you can essentially rewrite her for a drive -1, or you call a rear guard and give it 10k power. Honestly, like this deck, until we get more, like I'll say it, until this deck gets like a very strong card like Q-Tire, which it has recently in set 4 of Divines, but I'm not including this set. So for right now, I'm gonna put her in C tier, but once we get that card set 4 for Divines, I can see it possibly being a B or A tier deck, just because her gimmick is not locked against her opponent's grade at all. Sure, it's dependent on, you know, the rear guards of the deck, but Lyrical, like I keep saying, is same as Crystalline. We've been getting good support cards or good like generic cards that can make Petrolka stable. Not to mention she has more cards that counts as herself in the deck that can be rewritten, that can cycle back Petrolkas. We also have another card that can put Petrolkas back and even search Petrolka to reride for Persona Ride. Again, once we keep getting more cards and more like sub-engine cards, I think Petrolka will shoot up to B. Next, we have Clarissa. Ever since like, I guess the dress up, well, even after dress up, I'm not really seeing that much of anything from Clarissa. Not even like the dedicated Clarissa players really play her that much, other than just having a fun deck. Clarissa's strength is that she's able to wipe the opponent's board, but most of, if not most of the meta or cards in this day and age can easily replace those cards or just clear the board. So like something against, like, for example, in his list, like Flam Glam against Clarissa, half your board could be just cleared and her effect is diminished because she's able to hit them. But if I could just easily replace them, then like it doesn't have that much value. She did recently get cards that was able to restand themselves or put more pressure to the board, but I think Clarissa's overall issue is not so much having the earnest correct, is that her order, or she needs a new order. If she had a new order that did something different, is substantially stronger than what she has now, I think the deck can be a lot better, especially against certain decks, is a check. However, again, I think her ride line is just really awful since it deters you from calling cards to the board. Plus, the deck doesn't have an early game, and if you go second, you're really struggling. So something that I was able to like help Clarissa allow to have a better early game, or just a new line entirely, will help the deck. But for right now, I'm gonna put her in D tier, just because I think I think the cards in C are definitely more played, but also they have like their gimmick is actually stronger than what Clarissa's doing right now. So again, no hate to people who like Clarissa, and she's not lower than the promo start card. Sorry, she's not lower than the promo starter. I mean boss card. They're both at the same tier. They just lack a lot of stuff, but they have the room for most improvement. Next, we have Lyrical. So I played Lyrical not with her new support cards, because other than the energy card, I don't think Lyrical received that much in terms of support. However, I personally think Lyrical, she has a very good late game, I think. However, I think with the recent reveals of like more defensive cards as standard, I think people can start to survive her original self with Heartfelt Song Lyrical turn a lot more easier, just because we've got a lot more defensive cards. However, I think against decks that don't build a lot of hand, she's still a very good deck to be able to like stop them with the Vanguard lane, as well as being able to like give your front row a lot of power in. No, she gives herself a lot of power, and just to restand them, she's gotten cards that's restood their cells in the back row. And overall, I think her issue is not necessarily the songs. I think for me personally, it was just her early game. She did receive a new card, but I'm not sure how well that card specifically changed Lyrical. I think her overall game plan and kit is very strong. It's very decent. The deck could be due for a new order that allows you to do something else, a new song. But overall, I'm going to put her in the B tier, just because still she still has the Sentinel restrict. Even though we do have Blagmire and Sanctitude out, there are still games where people cannot just guard because of how strong the Vanguard column is. Next, we have Celestial. Honestly, I'm not really sure what her issue is. I think it's probably 2 to 3 things. One of them is definitely popularity, because not a lot of people is playing Celestial, other than someone I've been frequently seeing on Twitter that plays her. That's been pretty innovative with her, which is very surprising. 2, I think it's just because her pressure is not as strong as the other decks. Comparing Celestial to Flame Glam, Celestial needs to set up in order to do like her very strong rewrite turn. Flame Glam, you just need 2 other cards with different names in the counterblast, and you get some of the same benefits of it. Celestial's White Wing and Black Wing isn't necessarily an issue, but it's just another step to something that they've made something stronger in the past. I mean, in the future, sorry, like Flame Glam. However, I think Celestial still has more room to grow when it comes to not necessarily deck building, but cards in the future, because you don't need necessarily every card to be a Black Wing or White Wing card. You just need certain cards to be able to get your engine rolling. So whenever we get more generic, stronger cards, again, like I said to my pre-example, someone was playing Franchette in his deck, which I'm not sure how strong that is, but in theory, you can return back your important Black Wing or White Wing cards in order to reuse them again for next turn and stuff like that. So for right now, just because of like what I've heard from other players, that they didn't really like the new Celestial support, that it doesn't like necessarily help with the deck's strengths and what it needs to be capable of to be in that degree, I'm gonna put her in C tier just for now. I think Celestial has room to grow. Next, we have Willista. So free from her restriction with Elvira, Willista now has her deck of full power plus other cards in the deck. However, I think that ever since that unrestriction, they've already printed Labrador, which was strong. I think she was just better with Willista. And other cards have a way much higher scaling when it comes to late game power. In her early game, is even being contested with decks that are able to guard earlier or even fight back against it. So I don't think Melissa is that strong as she was before. However, she still can make pretty solid numbers. She still has the Voice Blanc, like when she rides her dress up tech, to be able to draw more cards during her ride phase. And we still got more cards possibly in the future that could boost her up in order to make her stronger. So I want to be optimistic and say that she's a B at B tier. I think she does a lot more than like the cards in C tier because she already was established. She can still draw a bunch of cards. She can still have a very decent early game. And thanks to energy, she's able to draw more cards now and play more cards that have energy in them. So next, we have Feltyrosa. I like Feltyrosa, but honestly, before set 5, I would say Feltyrosa would be like in D, right? Or even C. However, with her new cards that she got, both of them, I think she's actually pretty decent. Her main issues are still that you still need a drive check a ghost, but the cards that she received can draw cards, restand rear guards, and as well as cycle back and force in Feltyrosas. So the decks that had Willista's ride line with Illumerays, you no longer have to play that. You could play Felty's ride line thanks to the grade 2. Albeit it probably won't be as consistent, but by playing, like I said, Felty's line, you're able to consistently get ghosts into soul, have a very pressuring board early game, so you can hit over 23, hit over Vanguard numbers, not defensively, but still have a very solid early game and just cycle cards back. Overall, Felty is still kind of high roll. If you don't get those ghosts from your drive checks, you're still checking blank, blank, or 2 triggers while your opponent PG'd. So with her set 4 stuff, she will be in B tier. Probably at the lower side of B, but she's no longer like in C or D tier. Next, my favorite deck, Herminia. So I'll probably make a video about her new stuff, obviously. But Herminia overall, I think, like, even today, the deck is still seeing play. It's very low, but ever since she got her new energy card, that's able to essentially just be a 20k attacker that draws for a count -1 Energy Blast 3. On enduring turns, when you have her 3 face down, it's simply Energy Blast 3, 10k and draw a card. But just because of the existence of that card, it alleviates so much pressure from Riley for you to I have to draw Riley in order to do these plays. It alleviates like half of the pressure. It makes Custodia, to be able to call her early game. Going second with Herminia is not bad. All these other decks except Kyoka, because she can, except Kyoka and Chris Rain are able to like utilize their energy going second and to be able to like successfully like maintain their conditions. All the other decks kind of struggle with going second because they want to go first a lot. Well, I guess Flame Gland can be counted into like the decks that can deal with going second because the power is scaled on damage, and if you're higher damage, you have more power. Herminia can actually do very well going second too. Not as strong as like Stridex, obviously, or as strong as some of the other decks that would like love to go second lane masks. Just because of the existence of the energy card, you're able to essentially use that going first and still have extra energy left over. Going first and using the double R, you will be able to not have that much energy if you need her for your enduring turn, but it's good enough for you to pressure your opponent while trying to dig for pieces for like shield, PGs, Herminias, anything else that you want in your deck. But overall, like, I think Herminia is very solid and she's been still seeing results even in Japan. So this might be a little bit my bias, but I've been consistently seeing her in teams or even in single events doing well, and me playing her by myself and testing as well. I'll say she's an A tier. Her ceiling is not as high as Letitia, definitely not as Letitia. Her ceiling it's a little RNG, but it's slightly lower than Michu, but she can still hit numbers. I can still hit 50 to 40k lanes and still pressure my opponent with 5 attacks. I can still draw. You even draw even more now in the deck, and we still have her shield based cards from her set 4. So overall, I'm saying Herminia is an A tier, just because she does a lot more than the other decks in this list. And it might sound like very crazy, like, oh, she's better than Coral or she's better than Vert, but I played against those decks with Herminia, with very competent players, and I'm still doing well for Herminia. I've not high rolled at all. I mid roll when it comes to drive checks, and I think she's just better. Next, we have Charmel. So with her new support, I think, well, for one, the deck doesn't need Riley anymore, thank God. 2, I think she still does the same gameplay as she wants to, but she's a little bit more consistent now. Honestly, like, I personally don't like Charmel just from the play style and like what the deck wants to do. But I have a hot take. I think she's gonna be in A tier for right now. It is like, I heard some players say it's kind of like high rolly that you need to get your pieces and stuff like that. But I think Charmel, with her new support and just like the few players that do play her, can make the deck work, and her ceiling is a lot higher than these decks. Well, Lilfa has the numbers, but not the consistency as like something like Charmel. Actually, I have all this list. I think Lilfa's almost at A. Almost. Just need more players of representation for the deck, but it's hard hampered on you needing to draw Fletty, which was the problem Herminia had. But now we have a different card that halves or alleviates the pressure on Riley, and it's a little bit better now. So if Lofa got another card like that, that will help. That is specifically only called a back row. But I think Charmel is a little bit better. I don't know. Oh, I'm actually just going to put her in B. But I think she's very high B. Same for like Lofa, because we only recently just now getting results for Charmel. But I think she's strong. She has the cards and tools for it. I think she just needs to draw some of them in order to get her game plan rolling. Same for Herminia, but Herminia has a lot more draw in her kit. She has a lot more cards that are able to like specifically search and bounce back your board and protect them for next turn. But Charmel doesn't necessarily have that, other than putting those cards that you called into your soul, and you have to redo it every turn. So now we have Fortia. Oh boy, Fortia. She got a really good card from set 4. Set 5 from Lyrical. But you're able to call a card from your drop zone, basically. So another Stolas that isn't Stolas. Fortia, I think it's still kind of high rolly. I'm just not seeing it. You still have to search for your OG or copies of her in order to restand her. Your front row still has decent power. You don't necessarily have to count box to do the restand. That's like her biggest boon. But you have to play more cards of her in the deck, which doesn't really do anything other than if you needed the Persona ride. Honestly, like before, I was thinking she was maybe a B tier. No, I'll still put her in B tier. She's more consistent as she was before, like before set 4, and now she's a lot more consistent, getting your friend units on board and trying to search for Fortias as well. Because I think you can get Fortia from the drop zone as well. So I think that she's just okay. She doesn't have the problems like them that like they're just lacking a bunch of stuff or just the numbers or consistency. She lacks I don't know. To me, it just feels high rolling, and the ceiling is not as high as a deck like Flam Glam. Like Flam Glam can commit stuff and not worry about losing their rears. Fortia kind of has to worry about that. There's no way to rebuild that other than from Stolas or other cards in the future. Next, we have Fennel. So, Fennel, I would say if you had Strega, you were set. You don't need any of the new cards from set 5, unfortunately. However, you didn't have Strega. I say that set 5 allowed you to actually play Fennel while breaking the arm and the leg to get Stregas. I still think Strega is stronger overall for the deck, but Fennel's gameplay has not changed. She's very simple. Play 3 orders a turn, have a bunch of trick or treats and drop, and swing with 2 your regards to have a crit, and you know you can press your deck because half your deck is trick and treats, and you just go from there. So I think a lot more decks in the meta or in the future are going to be more aggro, and Fennel can remove one of them, but I think if it's like super heavy aggro or going second, the deck could be very rough. A lot of decks have been getting a lot of good going first pressure. Fennel is very strong going first, but going second, I think that's where she struggles in. Not necessarily having the trick entries, but just, again, since most of your hand is fake, just because it can be trick entries before you go to grade 3, you can't necessarily guard all your opponent's attacks, especially against very high-powered multi-attacks, something like Magnolia. So I'm not going to put her in A, even though I wanted to, because she still has the issue of, you know, going second, not having that much room for like guarding against your opponent. She's not at C tier, so I'm just gonna leave her at B. I know there's a lot of decks in B, but I truly don't think they're in B. I mean in C, just because they have a lot more going for it and it's a lot more consistent than the decks in C. Next, we have Sienna. So Sienna, she received a restander, which is good. It helps her get more pressure. She's able to hit higher numbers thanks to the double R that she got. And her other card is very nice too, to get around just more ways to bounce her opponent's front row. But overall, Sienna herself, I think this is not a lot of people playing her, and the meta is not tailored towards her. Like, I'm not sure if there will ever be a time where the meta will be tailored towards Sienna. Her support cards are really good, but just towards Sienna herself, I don't really think the deck will be necessarily as strong as it will ever be, just because of how sporadic Bushiroad releases decks that just kind of self-mirage or doesn't care, like they interact with the bind zone. However, I will put her, I don't want to do half tiers because that's just not how I do it. It's either one tier or another. For right now, I put her in C, but she's very close to B. I think just not a lot of people are playing Sienna, and just a lot of decks, even some of the decks here, can just not care about the mechanic at all of Sienna. But if there is a deck that is hampered by it, I think she does really well, especially with a restander. Next, we have Pacifica. So Pacifica, contrary to what people believe, I think Pacifica is very strong. She still just lacks numbers, and that's just the main issue of Pacifica. She now has access to Senna and Aqua for her line, her ride line, and that helps a lot to be able to get your grade 2s, one that can, you know, draw for you, another that can search Pacificas, and also Pacificas as well. Since you want to Persona Ride and get Planet Idol onto your board, it helps a lot in the early game. And because she's a mermaid, you're able to proc Aqua for essentially free. You do use one soul, but I think that's fine. But just to be able to, you know, consistently search for the cards that you need. Overall, like I said, her main weakness is just her power. Like, her rearguard lanes don't hit significant numbers. Pacifica herself doesn't really hit a number either, other than like from Persona Riding. And even so, it's still low. But she makes up for that for having an amazing toolbox potential to be able to call whatever you want from your deck, and being able to essentially like have a very decent pressure turn, and also a very good early game if you build a deck towards that. She's sort of like Chris Rain, but Chris Rain has her divine skill and also like other tools in her kit to be able to facilitate to having a better late game. Pacifica doesn't have that, other than drawing 2 cards and putting a card back to your deck. Don't get me wrong, that's a very strong skill, but there's no like pressure from Pacifica herself. All your rears have to do the pressure, which she's just simply a twin drive with no real power than Persona Ride. There's no future cards or anything like that, or even anything from set 5 for divines that helps her out. I would love to put her in B tier. I think she's not as high as Sienna when it comes to like strength stat wise. I think Pacifica's like overall kit is good. It's just the power, and the power is very significant to the deck that I'm not able to like punch through hands. But her deck building is very open. Her line is very open too, and what you want to play, and the different strategies you can have is very open to. Next, we have Labrador. So, honestly, I don't have much to say about Labrador. It's still the same deck, really. You can't really mix any of the set 5 stuff with her. Yeah, any of the set 5 other than one card. No. You can't mix any of the set 5 stuff with her. She still does what she wants to do. Attack with her rear guards. She gets a crit. You call her back out, and you know, they have pretty solid numbers. They bounce back. You have a lot of shield in the deck. She still does what she wants to do, but I don't think she's doing anything better than what the A tier is doing. I mean, she's probably doing more than her main when it comes to crit and a lot of shield and self-bouncing. But now since her mini has that grade 2, her mini could just do what Labrador is doing, but just in a different way. The only issue I'll say from Labrador is that she just didn't receive much support, because the assumed support became another deck entirely. If there's a promo or a card in the future that allows them to both mix, then yeah, I think I'll put her in like an A tier. But for right now, she's still solid, so she just stays in B. Lastly, we have grade 4 Kairi. I'm not doing Persona Right Kairi because that does not exist to me, at least for now. Kairi overall, she has received a very significant boost. In set 5 for Lyrical, which is the mermaid line, which I'm just going to call it that, the mermaid line. Because one of the biggest issues that Kairi had was not drawing Penelope. And now you have a line that can search for Penelope, search for Kairi herself, because it's grade 2 or greater, so you have a grade 4 in your hand. You can, you know, prot the dragon early and use Yasmin to ride from hand. And you're able to search for, you know, your opponent grade 2s in that regard. Also, it opens up room so you don't have to run. You don't have to run the ballista line and adding an extra order in your deck, or 1 or 2 orders in your deck to do that. Albeit your early game will be slightly lower, but the consistency of you getting Penelope, have your Resanders, and giving all your rearguards 5k is very significant to the deck. That it makes it very, very strong. And it's something that you want to run compared to Willis's line. But you can still use Willis's line. But I think what Kairi received in this set was greatly just a mermaid line. Her others, double R, is not very effective for grade 4. And the other card for energy, you have better cards to play in the deck. But I think Kairi's A tier, just because of the mermaid line and, you know, all of the stuff that Kairi had. The only issue, well, for me personally, is just that how much stuff you need in order to get to the state that she wants to be in before set 5. But now set 5 is a lot easier thanks to the line. So I have no issues about that. With that being said, that is all for my tier list, and that's how I feel for the upcoming decks in set 5 and in the future. Not necessarily, I didn't count DZ set 4 for obvious reasons. It's not done yet, and not even Japan has it, so I can't judge the strength, or just me theorizing. So overall, I had a lot of fun talking about, you know, personally my list of what some of the decks could do. The decks are on the lower side. I think they have potential to become better when it comes to more feature support in the future, and just players playing it, experimenting, and showcasing their strengths for these decks. So overall, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe. I'm Zenarion, and I'm signing off.